This session of Scholarly Snippets is going to be over literature reviews. My name is Abbey Griffith. I'm a medical librarian at Kansas City University. This workshop is part of a series organized by librarians at osteopathic medical schools to help you advance your research skills and support your scholarly activities. Our target audience are students, faculty, clinicians, and librarians, but anyone and everyone is welcome. At the end of this session, I hope participants will be able to understand what a literature review is and what should be included in them, how they contribute to the biomedical literature, and learn some of the different types of reviews of literature and how they differ from each other. Okay, so literature review is a very broad term. We use it for a lot of different things, and so that can have a lot of confusion whenever we have students or faculty or even other librarians talking about literature review. So before we go too far into everything we're going to talk about today, I did want to take a moment to talk about kind of the two main ways that we use the terms literature review. The first is as part of another publication. A lot of times when you're working on a research article or even other types of larger, more structured reviews, we will say we need to include a literature review as part of the introduction. What we're talking about in that is really a background, looking at the body of evidence to explain the reasoning behind your article that you're writing and the research that you're doing. That background information describes your problem, and it's the support for your research or your proposed solution. It also usually covers contradictory articles and identifies gaps in the literature. The purpose of literature reviews as part of introductions or other articles is to provide background context to the research being done and written about in your article. The other way we use the term literature review is literature review as a whole, as in a whole article in and of itself. These kinds of literature reviews aim to describe the work that's already been published, summarizing the existing literature and providing context to it. This also includes contradictory articles and can offer additional narratives on the topic. Now, there are a lot of different types of reviews of literature, and we'll talk about them briefly later on, but for the bulk of this, I'm really going to focus on a more generic description of literature review as a whole. Okay, so literature review as a whole as something that we are trying to publish. What is that? It's really an evaluative report of the information that's already found in the literature on your selected area of study or your topic. Depending on the type that you choose, there may or may not be structure and requirements. Most literature reviews in the general sense are very broad and very open for authors to make them how they need or what they want. In general, it should describe, summarize, and evaluate and clarify the literature that's already existing. A literature review, though, is more than just a search for information. Things should be searched for, obviously, read, evaluated, and analyzed, and the relationships between the literature should be identified and articulated in the paper. It should provide context for the research and show previous research, highlight potential flaws in previous research, or outline gaps in the previous research. It's important that when you're writing something as a publication, you're not just summarizing, you're also analyzing the scholarly writings on a topic. Things should be comprehensive and cover background, current events, current studies, current information, and offer a narrative on whatever your specific topic is. An important aspect of literature reviews does include analyzing the previous research. In the biomedical realm, literature reviews serve to condense the emerging research into more manageable chunks, looking to relate new research to older studies and contemplating future applications. These types of reviews can help draw attention to new topics and research while also offering some insight or thoughts into future applications. As articles themselves, they are not just summaries, though summarizing is an important component of a good literature review as a publication. If you are writing something to publish as a standalone article, authors really should be trying to contribute to the conversation by analyzing works or offering a narrative along with it, relating things back to practice, to policy, whatever the goal of your literature review is. Now, I said we would talk about some of the different types of reviews of the literature out there. Review is a very broad type of publication, and there are a number of different ways and different categories of reviews. This is just a brief list of the different ways to review literature. And that is really what we're talking about when we say literature review. We are reviewing the literature. How and why we are doing that and the methods we use to do that really determine what type of review we're talking about. Each of these types of reviews listed on the screen have different goals and focuses. They have different search, appraisal, synthesis, and analysis expectations. Some of these reviews do require reproducibility. Some will have protocols that should be listed first. Some require reporting, others don't. It depends on the type that you're working on. The process for something like a systematic review looks a lot different than the process for a more general literature review or a narrative review. For most reviews, it's the focus and the question you're trying to address that will determine what type of review you should be doing. I can call something anything I want, but if I haven't followed the appropriate and proper protocols and steps, that does not make it what it is. Just because I write systematic review on something, if I did not follow the steps of a systematic review and I did more of a literature review search strategy, then that's really what I've been doing. There we go. So this is a table from an article by Grant and Booth titled Typology. Oh, let me find it. I had it on my last slide. Typology of reviews, an analysis of 14 review types and their associated methodologies. This article breaks down 14 different types of reviews that you can do and describes them and looks into the search, appraisal, synthesis, and analysis expectations and kind of requirements for these types of reviews. I've highlighted literature review here since that's really what we're talking about in this. Now, the term review itself is defined as to view, inspect, or examine a second time or again, according to Webster Dictionary. This chart, obviously, this article is looking at all different types of reviews, so that's something that's found on most of these labels. The difference for each, though, is coming in the process and the rigor required from the additional categories off to the side. The generic literature review allows for a wide range of topics and subjects and levels of comprehensiveness. It covers all different fields of study. Because of this, there are less stringent requirements in the search process, appraisal of the articles, and the analysis. They also tend to be pretty narrative. What they do offer for authors is a little bit more freedom within those components, things like searching. There's no requirement to be comprehensive, though they can be and should be as comprehensive as you can. I always recommend comprehensive searching to students whenever they come talk to me. If we compare that to something like a meta-analysis that's just 2 rows down, you can see a great bit of difference between the requirements and the focus of the two. If we move up to critical review, just above literature review, you can see that the differences are a little bit less. Most of the time, whenever I have students come in and talk to me about wanting to do a literature review or publish a literature review, when they begin describing what their focus is, it becomes pretty apparent that they're talking about doing more of a critical review. And that's fine. There are some of these review types, there are a lot of differences, and some they're very, very minor, and it's just in the focus. And that's what librarians and experts in these fields are here for. Every type of review is going to have its own pros and cons, its own strengths and its own weaknesses. For generic literature reviews, the positive aspects are that they identify what's already been done, and they can connect the dots between different studies. They consolidate the knowledge on a topic so we can see the bridges or the potential bridges between different works. This allows for a continual building on previous works and an expanding of the knowledge. A big part of literature reviews is to identify the gaps in the literature. These can show where things are lacking, where there's potential for more research, or help highlight bias that may be present in the field. For weaknesses in general, a literature review doesn't have a strong data analysis component as part of the publication. There is a lack of systematic or comprehensive searching, which can open the review up to a lot of bias. Things like author selectivity in study inclusion. There's no requirement for critical appraising of studies, though it is something that we should be doing whenever we are reviewing studies anyway. But because of that, the validity of a study may not be as thoroughly questioned as it should. The cons do sound not so great whenever you put them on a screen or you read them out, but it's important to remember the purpose of a literature review. Not everything in publication needs to be a systematic review, and literature reviews do have a great purpose in the medical literature. The chart at the bottom of this shows the number of papers in PubMed by year, starting at 1945 and ending in 2017. Now, this is how many papers are added per year. Since 2017, we have continued to add even more every year. That number is currently around 1 million articles added to PubMed every single year. That is an impossible number to manage individually, even if we filter down by subject or specific research topic. That is a lot of information for any one individual to ingest. And this is why literature reviews and other types of reviews are so important in medical publications. They provide the overviews that connect the new research to the previous studies, and they identify those gaps and showcase where we could focus more research in the future. They act as those bridges from research to applied use, and they synthesize and summarize knowledge. They function to support academic rigor, pull in questions, bring up concerns, and have those conversations. And they can also play a role in policy decisions. So this is really more of a general procedure for conducting literature reviews. If you are doing more strict reviews, systematic reviews, meta-analysis, scoping reviews, mapping reviews, anything that has rules about how you do it, that is going to look quite a bit different than what is on this screen. This is for just a general rule of conducting a literature review. The first step, as with any type of research that we're doing, is to formulate our problem. What is the topic and why do we feel like it's something that needs to be reviewed? We have to think about the why behind the work. The focus and the goal that you're trying to answer with your review is going to determine what type of review you're doing and what steps you're going to need to take. Once you've established that, searching the literature is the next step. Again, this is going to look different for different types of review. In general, a generic literature review, we're going to be looking at several different databases and sources to see what is out there and to try and minimize bias. We have to find a balance between relevancy and the number of results we get coming back. For a general literature review or a preliminary search, we can test out a variety of keywords and combinations and search strategies to see which are going to pull the most optimal results. Once we get through that and have an idea of the best way to go about searching, we can start screening for inclusion. Now, in a generic literature review, you don't necessarily have pre-selected criteria for inclusion and exclusion. For more structured reviews like systematic reviews, you will have that done before you can do this part. To screen articles, you really skim them and see if the studies address your topic. If they do, keep them. If not, you can just move on. You have to be careful, though, not to toss out opposing stances, because those should be included in your results. Just because they don't fit your theory or your narrative doesn't mean that they're not valid and shouldn't be discussed. Assessing the quality of articles involves looking at the methodologies of the studies that you're including. This is not as strict as other types of reviews in a generic literature review, but it is something that we should be doing every time we're reading an article or a study in the first place. You have to look at the methodology and the bias in the primary study to determine the quality and validity of that study and how much weight or conversation you should give it within your review. Oops. Scrolled right too far. From there, you move on to data extraction. This is once you've compiled the studies you plan to include, you review them again, you read it in more detail, and you start pulling that information that is important for your paper. This is a close review of each article, taking note of the important information and the context. And lastly, we move on to analyzing and synthesizing the data. Now, for a review, I tend to do this while I'm extracting the data. That is just how my brain works. As I'm pulling things out that I think are important, I am usually organizing and summarizing and interpreting that so that I know where I stand and where I need to look for more information. Once you have gone through all of your analyzing of your data, you should be able to see where your review is going, if there are any gaps that you maybe need to address, and then find a way to contribute to the knowledge on that topic. Why do a literature review? Well, literature reviews, again, add that narrative account to the evidence. This is where that summarize and analyze comes in. You need to be sure that what you're adding is effective, analytical, and original. You're only adding value to the evidence if you're adding something to it. Summarizing is important, but for a standalone publication, you should be adding something new to the conversation as well. This can be an extension of the work that's already been done in the past, so you're just building on an existing narrative. They can also be theory-based and may involve reviewing some data under the same context that a previous author did. Or you can reappraise the evidence, and that involves reviewing and analyzing the data in a completely different way. Literature reviews also provide a critical review of the evidence. Knowledge itself doesn't exist in a vacuum, and it can't have value unless it's shared. So your thoughts on a new and emerging procedure or test need to be shared in order for others to join the conversation and to provide that value. Providing a critical review and synthesis can really bring attention to the current knowledge, and it can highlight the strengths, limitations, gaps, and bias in a topic. It also provides the context we need in research to relate it to the rest of the body of knowledge. One of the questions that we got with registration was about students having difficulty doing a literature review or getting them published. And that can definitely be true. I don't know about every institution, but at mine, we have students who do write literature reviews on their own at times and do seem to have success getting them published. But the majority that I see are students working with faculty who are experienced on a topic, considered respected voices on a topic, and really just all around serving as that expert to ask questions of. We are an osteopathic medical school, so we do have OMM faculty, and they will occasionally be approached by osteopathic journals to write a review or to go over a technique and write about that in more detail for publication. And in those cases, they will usually, our faculty will invite students on to give them some experience reviewing the literature and doing some searching, and give them some experience in writing up an article for publication. Along with that question was a comment about journals preferring systematic reviews and meta-analysis. There are a lot of systematic reviews and meta-analysis, but they do take a lot of time to perform in comparison to a literature review as a standalone article. It's also important to remember that just because we see a lot of them doesn't mean that they are necessarily more desirable. They have their purpose and they have their focus, but literature reviews also have a specific focus and a goal for themselves as well. If journals are preferring systematic reviews and meta-analysis, that is a bias. That is something that should be addressed, but is unfortunately human nature at times. Another question we had prior to today was the difference between a systematic review and a meta-analysis. So systematic reviews and meta-analysis both fall under the category of all reviews, which include these traditional literature reviews that are not scientific in nature. That is the big blue circle. The medium blue circle are systematic reviews. The goal of a systematic review is to collect, critically appraise, and synthesize all of the evidence answering a given clinical question. Part of the systematic review process requires a pre-selected eligibility criteria, along with reproducible and reported search strategies, a list of databases searched, and a lot of additional steps aimed at removing as much bias as possible. A meta-analysis, that is the smallest blue circle here, that is really a systematic review with math thrown in. A systematic review is looking to answer a clinical question. A meta-analysis is looking to run a statistical analysis on the data of studies combined as if they were one giant study. So systematic review is answering a question, and a meta-analysis is answering a question and seeing what all of the data says as a whole. Another question that was sent in was asking for the difference between a scoping review and a systematic review. And the difference between these two types of reviews is the focus and how you are asking your question. Systematic reviews typically are addressing a clinical and answerable question using a PICO format. PICO stands for population or patient, intervention, comparison or control, and outcome. And these are very focused. They are looking to answer a very specific question. In a patient with this, does this treatment compared to this other treatment have a favorable outcome? That is kind of what we're looking at when we're talking about a systematic review and the way that we ask questions for them. Scoping reviews use a PCC format for their question, and this stands for population, concept, and context. These reviews are much broader in what they are searching for because they are not looking to answer a specific question. They are looking to identify trends or themes within a topic. So given the difference in the questions and the goals, the types of publications that are included may also differ. A systematic review looking to answer a clinical question may be focusing only on randomized controlled trials because those are the best way to answer this question. A scoping review may be a bit broader in the types of articles it includes, things like editorials or literature reviews, narratives, things along those lines. This is something that I just found interesting. I do not claim this to be scientific or accurate in any way, shape, or form. I just wanted to see if I put in literature review, systematic review, meta-analysis, scoping review, critical review, and rapid review in PubMed as a publication type, what the numbers would show. And this is really what it looks like it's showing right now. Still, literature reviews showing up pretty heavily. Critical reviews doing okay, but scoping reviews a little lower on that. So I just thought that was some interesting data. The thing to remember is that terms like literature review and systematic review may be used in the same article. You may read something where the title is a systematic review of the literature or a literature review with systematic somewhere in the title. So those are things to keep in mind whenever you are looking at review types or titles. Not everything is going to be 100% accurate whenever you're searching for it. So these are questions that I get a lot from students. One of the most common questions I get asked is how many sources or references should I have? And I would very much love to have a magical number for that and say, okay, if you're writing 3 pages, you need X number of references. But unfortunately, that's not quite the way that it works whenever you're talking about trying to get published. I can say if you're writing a 3-page literature review, 150 sources might be excessive. If you're writing a 10-page review, 10 is probably not enough. But how many you need really depends on the length of your article, the topic or the focus, what you're trying to answer, and how much depth you end up going into. It also depends on what is available on this topic in the first place. You need to make sure that you have enough to define and support the discussion and the narrative that you're putting out there. And when in doubt, check other reviews on a similar topic or check the journal that you're looking to publish in for guidance. What do what are other literature reviews have? How many references do they have for this journal? The next question I get a lot is when can I stop searching? I advise searching until the point of saturation. If you're not doing systematic searching or comprehensive searching like that. The point of saturation in searching is the point at which you aren't getting anything new back. With this type of searching, you should be trying using different databases, trying different keywords, search methods, reaching out to a librarian for help if you need to try and cover as much as you can to see what is out there and what exists on your topic. With a generic literature review, you aren't necessarily tied down to a single search strategy, so you do have some freedom to adjust your searches as needed until you get the results that work for your topic. The point of saturation is when after all of those changes and adjustments, adding synonyms, keywords, acronyms, all of those things, when you have done all of that and you aren't getting back any new information or you're seeing the same study repeat over and over again, then that's usually a pretty good sign that you've exhausted what you can do. You can always reach out to a librarian for help and for backup on that, But typically whenever you aren't seeing anything new pop up in your searches, then you've covered what you can. How long will this take is another question. It's not a weekend project. Anything that you're writing for publication should take you more than a couple of days. But a generic literature review isn't something that's going to take you as long as a systematic review or a meta-analysis or the more complicated types of reviews. It should still take you a decent chunk of time, but they are less time consuming than other types of reviews. One question that I didn't really have anywhere to put in the rest of the slides was on discussion sections. With literature reviews, you don't necessarily need a discussion section. And from the way that the question was worded, I'm assuming it was talking about cases of some kind. Really, the discussion section for a paper is where you explore the whys behind the results and the data. This is where you talk about the implications of the results and speculate on what they could mean. And this section of the paper is really where you connect the hypothesis to the results. Questions that you can ask and address in this section, in a discussion section, are: how well did it work? What are the benefits? What are the drawbacks? How is this different from earlier research? And is that due to the difference in study design? This is where you need to make sure you organize your thoughts and create a clear flow through the discussion, because this should be more of a conversation and you telling the story of the data and the results. Discussion sections are typically a little bit more narrative than other parts like methodology or result sections of papers. And it's where you talk about what you think the most important takeaways for your research are and for this article. Okay, that is what I have for that.
So I wanted to note, Abby, that there was one comment earlier on when you were talking about different types of reviews where a librarian shared that they do accreditation documentation and narratives for their programs and that they love mapping reviews.
Awesome.
Yes. There was also a question about, do you have recommendations to help ensure that your literature review is as comprehensive as possible? That was a little earlier on, so perhaps that person's question has since been answered.
Hope so, but my recommendation to be as comprehensive as possible is always to use multiple databases. Anything that you have available to you that is going to have something that's going to meet your research needs or your topic, using as many databases as you can and trying as many different ways as you can to search for that topic. Use those synonyms, use acronyms. If you have controlled vocabularies like mtree or mesh with the databases you're using, use those and add those in there and see what you can find. And if you are having trouble and you feel like you're not getting the results that you need, or you're not getting to that point of saturation with a search of the literature, reach out to a librarian at your institution or wherever and see if they can offer some insight onto that.